welcome to the Weekly Sceptic, episode 76. I'm Nick Dixon, here with the creator of Wet January, Toby Young. Coming up, Alexei Navalny sadly and mysteriously dies in prison. The Tories lose bigly in 2 by-elections, and Sadiq Khan turns the frickin' trains woke. Plus peak woke and extra content for our subscribers on basedmedia.org. But Toby, you're in front of some spooky books. It looks like Ghostbusters 2 or something. What are you up to?
Yeah, I'm actually in the Apollo room at the Spectator. A friend of mine was made a life peer in Liz Truss's honours list, and he was introduced into the House of Lords today. So I went along to see him being introduced, and then there was a kind of tea party in the Chumley room afterwards, and then I rushed over here. It's just around the corner.
That's very Toby. And did you feel a pang of regret that you were not being inducted into the House of Lords or whatever it's called?
I saw it more like a dress rehearsal, Nick. So now I'll be fully prepared when it inevitably happens.
Just a matter of time, my precious. Okay, cool. So we're going to do our best to smash through this. Thank you for everyone that came to Weekly Sceptic Live. I was doing my best, a bit ill, still not sure what's going on. But I have also quit Coke Zero for Lent. So it may be a lower energy podcast. I don't know, because I've never known what it's like to live without Coke Zero since it was invented. So I picked the hardest possible thing for me to give up. Anyone who knows me knows I get through about 10 cans a day. So I've given it up for Lent, and we're just seeing how it goes. And I just want to show Toby how you give up something and just shame him, really. Because how's the alcohol going?
Yeah, not great. My plan was to not drink at all. Well, I initially started out not wanting to drink until the end of Lent, from the beginning of January until the end of Lent, and then I kind of scaled that back in my head to just January, and then on something like the 6th or the 7th of January, I fell off the wagon, and it's been downhill ever since. But my plan over the year was to drink no more than 100 bottles of wine. And I'm making a daily log of how many bottles of wine I drink, and I think I'm approaching a third at least of my annual allocation. We're not even out of February, so it's not looking great.
Shocking stuff, Toby. You just need to copy me. You need to be a proper Christian. That's how you do it. Every time I think about having a Coke Zero, I just think, what would Jesus do? He's in the desert. Satan's tempting him with loaves of bread and political power and the glory of all the world and the mountains and all this kind of stuff, and he's just like no, and he's rejecting him. And so I just think, if I can't not drink Coke Zero for 6 days, this is why you lack
so you're taking advantage of the Sunday loophole, are you? So you'll be able to drink Coke Zero on Sundays.
No, I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, you said for 6 days.
Oh no, I just said that it's lasted about that long so far.
It's been 6 days so far. Yeah, no, it is a thing. Some people who give up alcohol for Lent allow themselves to drink on Sundays. So actually, they only have to give it up 6 days a week. It's like some kind of theological rationale for it.
Sounds a bit weak to me. No, I'm not going to do that, and I'm not drinking alcohol either. But that's not even half of me. That's not even on a worry. So I'm doing your Wet January. I'm doing your Dry January Lent thing effortlessly, and I'm doing the Coke Zero that actually hurts as well. Anyway, not to big myself up,
well done.
But I'm only doing it with the guidance of the Lord. So, all right, well, let's crack on with the old stories then, before anyone shouts at me that I'm talking about irrelevant stuff. So the Tories lost a couple of big by-elections in Wellingborough and Kingswood, and Wellingborough is interesting because they still wouldn't have won with the reform votes, actually. Labour got 13,844, Tories 7,408, Reform 3,919. And I've done the math, and they still wouldn't have got it even with the reform vote. But the big takeaway was that there was almost 25,000 fewer Tory votes than last time, I believe. I think that's what the little brackets are with the minus, isn't it? And so the main takeaway was that 20,000 previous Tory voters just sat at home and said, we're not going to bother with you guys. But they didn't flock to Labour. They didn't even flock to Reform for the most part. So I think that was the real takeaway. Then Kingswood, we can also get into, but Kingswood, the Tories would have scraped it with a reform, with the Reform vote. Labour got 11,151, Tories 8,675, Reform 2,578. So, and I'm doing all this from memory like Rain Man. No, I'm not. But so they would have just scraped it there. But the sort of main takeaway I was hearing was that it wasn't a massive victory for Reform, or in a way really Labour. It was more just that the Tory voters are just disgusted. What do you think?
Yeah, it felt more like a protest vote rather than a vote for the Labour candidates. I was hoping that Ben Habib, the Reform Party candidate in Wellingborough, would come second, knocking the Tories into third place. And I'll tell you why. It's because I think one slither of hope to prevent a Labour landslide would be some kind of tactical voting alliance between Reform and the Tories. Now, pie in the sky, but what would make it, in order to get to kind of first base in putting together some kind of tactical voting alliance, you need to identify some seats in which Reform have a better chance of winning than the Tories. So then the deal is if the Tories stand down their candidates in those seats, then Reform won't oppose the Tory candidates in seats where the Tories have the best chance of winning. But unfortunately, the reason it's really hard to get anything like that off the ground is because in no single constituency in the whole of the UK is Reform in a better place than the Tories. In every single case, Reform are behind the Tories. So I was hoping we could point to Wellingborough and say, well, if the Tories stand down in Wellingborough, how many seats will Reform then stand down in to give the Tory party candidate the best possible chance? But unfortunately, they didn't come second, they came third. So I think it's going to be very difficult to interest either party in a deal along those lines. Maybe if and I don't think Rishi Sunak, of course, would be interested anyway, even if there were some seats in which the Tories were, in a worse position than Reform. But his successor might be interested, and that could be part of their kind of platform, their sort of leadership platform. I'll do a deal with Reform. We'll shoot the Reform fox. We'll make sure we reduce the Labour, etc. But yeah, it doesn't look like that's going to be possible.
But isn't the other issue with that the fact that Farage would never do that again after doing that in the past? And then some people feeling betrayed and him feeling that it didn't work out for them. They stood aside for the Tories and then they didn't get the Brexit they wanted and so on. And wasn't that the general vibe behind that?
Yes. Yeah. Last time, the Brexit Party wasn't offered anything in return for not opposing Conservatives, in various seats. And that's part of why, Farage is now kind of quite cross. I effectively gave the Tory party this gift of an 80-seat majority, and look how they've squandered it. Never again. But this wouldn't be a gift. The idea is this would be a deal. The Reform would get something in return. I think it would be harder actually to persuade the Tories to do it than to persuade Reform to do it. I mean, given that Reform are unlikely to win a single seat, if the Tories stood down in, say, 5 seats, giving them the best possible chance of winning, then they might agree not to oppose the Tories in the remainder of those seats, because at least then they'd have a shot at winning 6 seats. But
Okay.
it's unlikely.
The other angle I saw was this in the Express: start warning for Labour that Reform UK could wreck Starmer's dream of a majority. This came from Labour Together think tank, and they have this scenario where the Reform vote collapses, and that ends up with a hung Parliament. So they said a third estimates that there'll be a hung Parliament if support for Reform UK collapses, either due to Rishi Sunak delivering on the small votes or the party stepping aside for the Tories. So so you've sort of said, yeah, if they step down, but if for some reason it collapsed, then you end up, well, in this projection, Labour would have 312 seats, which is a 14 short of a majority. So that's
Right.
interesting. They're trying to not be complacent. But to me, the takeaway is if all these 20,000 Tory voters suddenly didn't show up, it suggests to me that they didn't show up, but they didn't vote for someone else. It suggests to me they're waiting to see, and that actually does give the Tories an opportunity, even though they don't really deserve one, to rescue
Yes.
it before the election,
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
like, right, we're not going to vote for you, but let's see what you do before the election. What do they call soft switches? Some of these
Mm.
soft switches who could
Mm.
switch back. I think that might be the wrong term for the stay at homes, but whatever. You've got the stay
Yeah.
at homes, you've got the soft switches. But what are the Tories going to do? Are they going to take that up? Because that means they could suddenly, if they did get rid of Rishi, or if Rishi did something very bold, I think they could win them back still. But I don't think they will do anything to win them back.
Yes. I mean, I think that they don't seem, the people who are sitting on their hands don't seem inclined to get off their hands and vote Labour during the general election, as you say. They'll either stay at home, or it might be possible to persuade them to actually vote and vote Conservative. And one of the ways in which Team Rishi are going to try and do that is by scaring people. They're going to say Starmer's actually poses a real danger to the country, poses a danger to our national security. He's weak. Foreign bad actors will take advantage of our weak prime minister. The economy will suffer. Back to square one, etc. This will be the theme of the Conservative general election campaign. All those stay-at-home, complacent, sit on their hands voters who voted Tory last time, get up off your asses, vote Tory again to avoid the disaster that will be a Starmer premiership. I'm not sure that that'll work, but something like that might work better, and the people might be willing to get out and vote for a Tory if they change leaders between now and the general election. And there has been a bit of speculation about that. Kemi's been in the news this week because she's been clashing with, what's he called, Henry Staunton, the chairman of the post office, whom she got rid of. And when she got rid of him, he then seemingly took revenge by giving this story to the Sunday Times on Sunday, in which he said that she said to him when she got rid of him, someone's got to take the rap for the Horizon scandal, as though it was through no fault of his own. They just needed a fall guy. And he also said that he'd been advised by the Secretary of State to delay concluding some kind of compensation scheme with the sub-postmasters so the Tories could limp into the next general election without that liability being hung around their necks, which doesn't really make much sense because how big a liability is it really going to be in the grand scheme of things? But Kemi came out fighting and said that this was absolute nonsense. This was a farrago of lies. And it looks like he's now going to sue her, because she didn't just say this in the House of Commons. She also said it on Twitter on Sunday night after the Saturday night when the Sunday Times story broke, I think, anyway. And so that's rumbling on, and people are describing this as Kemi's biggest test to date. She's this guy's really challenged her, and doesn't look like he's going to let this go, and she's not going to let it go either. She's gone all in on this, so it's quite dramatic. But I think that it's she will probably prevail. I mean, even if he does sue her, how bad for her does it look? She's being sued by this fat cat who, she fired because she's concerned about the sub-postmasters. She can position herself, I think, as being on their side in contrast to him, or at least that's how she'll try and play it. So I think it's probably politically quite a smart move. It's interesting that, there's been, you haven't heard much about more letters going in, or there hasn't been kind of feverish speculation about a successor to Rishi in spite of the by-election losses. It feels like the plotters are kind of biding their time, regrouping, preparing to strike, but didn't think this was the right moment to strike.
Yeah, it's funny how different our politics is to America. It's like Trump's getting sued for 400 million and might end up in jail, but Kemi's getting sued by the post office. It seems quite quaint in comparison, though. Like you say, it is a big test for her. The other thing is the Tories might face a Blackpool by-election because Scott Benton has lost his suspension appeal. This was about that gambling scandal, and so they might have another by-election to face. And then, of course, Labour have got the Rochdale problem, where they have withdrawn since our last episode that support for that Azhar Ali guy. Finally, they did it reluctantly, but they did do it. So there's more by-election chaos coming up. What do you think? I mean,
that happened.
Tories could lose Blackpool,
that happened
South Blackpool.
Yeah, that happened during our last episode, didn't it? We were kind of ambushed by the news that Keir Starmer had decided, after initially supporting the Labour candidate in Rochdale, to withdraw Labour's support, even though he'll still be standing as the official Labour candidate. It'll be interesting. I think Keir Starmer must be hoping that, unsavoury though the Labour candidate in Rochdale is, he won't be beaten by George Galloway, because that could create a bit of momentum behind George Galloway's new political party and attract some of the traditional Muslim Labour voters who are unhappy about Labour's stance over the Israel-Palestine conflict, although Keir Starmer is also shifting on that particular issue, and it looks as though the SNP have tabled another call for a ceasefire, and it looks as though Keir Starmer may be preparing the ground for supporting that motion, which would be a complete U-turn on his previously, I thought, impressive, steadfast, pro-Israeli position. But he's obviously terrified that they're bleeding support to candidates like George Galloway. And there are all these kind of, George Galloway's party is one of seemingly about half a dozen trying to cash in on the Muslim disillusionment with Labour. But it looks as though, a typical spineless, slippery, snake-like politician, Keir Starmer, is going to actually do a volte-face on that issue and align himself with the pro-Palestinian protesters, seemingly.
Spineless Starmer. That's what Trump might call him. Boring, spineless Starmer. Folks, he's so boring. Any spineless, I'd have to pick one of those. Spineless Starmer's quite good, though, isn't it?
Not bad.
Spineless Starmer, folks. They say he has no spine. Yeah, I mean, he inevitably is going to fold on that. I mean, David Cameron, I saw this depressing thing that David Cameron has outflanked him from the left, which is something that David Cameron's been doing for a long time with the Tories. He's basically Blair, and it's so depressing. But imagine like outflank, because he was going on about ceasefire early on. He saw where that was going quite early and just went full ceasefire already, didn't he? And Starmer's done it later because of course, he doesn't want to be called anti-Semitic amongst other reasons. But he inevitably will be anyway. But it's very depressing, all that. And on the candidate thing, Wes Streeting even put out an apology saying, I'm sorry there are no good candidates in Rochdale. So that's really hanging your candidate out to dry. But they had to do it, because they've got these awful people. But yeah, he just said, sorry, we haven't got a good candidate. I mean, imagine going into it like that. It'd be amazing. If he still wins, that shows that Labour really can't do any wrong at the moment. People are just going to vote for them, whatever. If you've got a candidate who's shared an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory and the actual big people in the party have said, I'm sorry, he's awful and crap, don't vote for this guy. Imagine if he still wins.
I think he could still win. I think he's probably more likely to win than George Galloway. George Galloway, is running as an independent. He has won before running as an independent, but his star, I think, is fading a little bit. I don't know if you've ever watched George Galloway on one of his kind of obscure TV channels where he's sort of a chat show host or talk show host, but he's not the kind of firebrand he once was. He's he must be approaching 80 by now, and I thought he was, when I watched him by mistake, I just stumbled across him on the dial one night quite late, and I just thought he was really unimpressive.
Okay, well, I've never quite understood Galloway. He's an impressive speaker, wears a nice hat, but I've never quite understood where he's coming from or what the point of it is. Sort of a radical lefty, but aligns strongly with Islam. I've never really quite understood the offering. He had that famous moment calling out the Iraq War, which was quite good. So he can be an impressive orator, or orator, depending on your proclivities. But what is the kind of idea of Galloway? It's just a sort of far left firebrand iconoclast.
Yeah, I think he's always bought into that kind of that particular strand of socialist internationalism, which sees oppressed peoples making common cause the world over, whether it be in apartheid South Africa, in present-day Gaza, in disadvantaged working class communities like Rochdale, sees it as part of a kind of an international coalition of the oppressed, kind of waging war on capitalism. And so he feels there is this kind of natural alliance to be made with Islamists and the white working class. Same sort of political stance, I guess, as Jeremy Corbyn, and also the same coalition that sprung up in opposition to the Iraq War. I think that was really George Galloway was opposed to the war. He was ejected from the Labour Party, and he decided to take his revenge by standing, I think, in Bethnal Green on an anti-war platform, a pro-Islam platform, and duly won. So it's worked with him before, and he's obviously just singing from the same hymn sheet and hoping it'll work for him again. It worked for him in I think Hill Head as well. So it's worked for him three. This will be the third time if it works again. But last time we tried it, it didn't work.
Okay, and the only difference between him and Corbyn is that he has a strangely cozy relationship with Andrew Neil, which I always find strange, but it must be a Scottish thing. It's some sort of
Yeah,
Scottish
I
thing I don't
never
understand.
quite understood that either. Yeah, old drinking buddies.
Yeah, but I think you're a spectator, so we don't want to say anything bad about Mr. Neil in case he comes and gets you. But let's
My
do this
boss might
related
walk through
story.
the door any second.
Oh yeah, could exactly. It can all kick off very easily. Let's do this related story. GB News investigated over pro-Tory bias in Sunak Q&A. So we had this Sunak Q&A. It's quite strange. I had to like tease it on headliners and do like a. Everyone was quite impressed how professionally I did it. They've not been listening to this podcast presumably, but I just nailed the introduction. We had to introduce it and tease it, and it was Sunak doing this Q&A, and then it happened, and it was the thing that made most headlines was the vaccine injured person sort of shouting at him, "You've ruined my life," sort of thing. I'm paraphrasing, but it was along those lines. And of course, I have massive sympathy for the vaccine injured. Obviously I didn't take it. No one on this podcast took it, but it's and I felt for the guy. But it was an awkward moment. Some people said this has backfired for Sunak, which we can discuss. But it also backfired in the sense that there were 500 complaints about this People's Forum from sad people at home and activists, presumably. And Sunak said he didn't regret taking part in it, but it's another Ofcom investigation. I mean, is there anything wrong? I don't really see what's wrong with it. You have debates all the time with the Prime Minister. You have all sorts of forums where the Prime Minister sort of faces questions on a mainstream news channel. I don't really see the problem at all. I don't see why there's bias. I mean, you saw how he didn't come out of it that well. It was grilled on some very uncomfortable topics. So it
Mm.
wasn't a sort of bias sort of puff piece. So I don't really see the problem.
Yeah, it was. It was. I don't know why it attracted 500 complaints. It was because all the clips I saw, I didn't actually watch it, but all the clips I saw were of him kind of, being made very uncomfortable by very difficult questions that he clearly hadn't anticipated from members of the audience, including from the gentleman who was injured by the vaccine. And there was someone else in the audience who also seemed to have been injured by the vaccine, complaining about the inadequate compensation scheme. He was completely wrong-footed by that. And it was also, the way it was shot wasn't particularly flattering to Sunak. I mean, it was all shot from behind. So you just see the back of his head. He was wearing this kind of dazzling white shirt. And you could see the mic tucked into his rear pocket. But there were 100 undecided voters. It wasn't like, an audience full of Tory plants. And I thought they gave him a reasonably rough time. I didn't think it was any more kind of pro-Tory than a typical grilling that, leaders get on the BBC or Sky or ITV. So it was bizarre. Maybe it was Labour Party apparatchiks making the vast majority of the complaints, trying to tee up an excuse or give Ofcom an excuse to shut down GB News if Labour win the next general election. There were five complaints now have been upheld by Ofcom against GB News, including over GB News's Keep Cash campaign. I mean, I don't know why Ofcom upheld a complaint about that. I mean, it's not as if GB News is alone in campaigning for things. I complained to Ofcom a couple of years ago. Me and Laura Dodsworth submitted a complaint to Ofcom because Sky News, in collaboration with the Nudge Unit, which at that stage was part of the Cabinet Office, part of the UK government, was promoting a kind of climate change agenda. And they were urging other broadcasters to embed kind of support for net zero and other kind of climate alarmist policy stuff in their programming content, even in their drama content. So let's have the heroes of drama series driving EVs instead of petrol Land Rovers. It was like literally urging broadcasters to include subliminal messages in their content to get people to side with what was then, what still is a UK Conservative government policy. So we complained to Ofcom and said this is a breach of the broadcasting code, and they gave us very, very short shrift, didn't consider it seriously at all. And yet someone complained about GB News' apparently much less, partisan let's keep cash campaign, and the complaint was upheld.
Madness, I know, and the fact that Lewis Schaefer's had no complaint upheld is truly stunning. But he did a good one the other day. We were talking about macaque monkeys, and he just goes, "Let me tell you about macaque," and it was a great moment. Actually, it was one of his best jokes. To be honest, one of his only proper structured jokes. But that did seem to disappear. Some people said from the YouTube repeat, but so far no Ofcom complaints. I'm amazed. I haven't had any either, but or Leo. But I mean, I'm quite careful, but. yes, I mean, they do seem to target GB. I'm not sure if it's Ofcom's fault or just the fact they get so many complaints that they have to investigate a certain number. And I suppose percentage-wise, a certain number get upheld. But it does seem, yeah, they're targeted, as you say. It's no doubt the Matthew Sweets, the Otto Englishes. I'm not saying they've literally done it. The Carol Vordermans. It's these online campaigns, isn't it, to get the people because as you said, there's nothing wrong with that People's Forum. And I just want to shout out the hardworking GB people who do their best with a low budget, because you said that that it was shot badly. I feel bad about my employers there.
Only had one camera. One
Yeah,
to
I
point
don't
at
know why that
Rishi.
was. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm sure it was shot brilliantly, but yes, he didn't come out of it that well, and he said he didn't regret it. But I suspect he probably did a bit. And yeah, but it's so strange. But he can't really win, can he? Because then you still get complaints about it. Yeah, I suppose Rishi's got to do something. He thinks, well, these are people that could vote for me, but how many GB News viewers will vote Tory still at this point? I'm not sure.
Yeah, there was the only bit of kind of plotter activity I detected since we last recorded was another poll was published showing that 8 out of 10 former Tory voters thought the party would have a better chance of winning the election with a leader who embraces traditional conservative values, i.e., not Rishi Sunak. And it was commissioned by Lady McAlpine. And got a fair amount of coverage. And Lord Moylan, the Tory peer, said the party only had one path to victory, and it involved getting rid of Rishi Sunak and adopting proper red-blooded conservative policies. And it was quite a large sample, 13,534 British adults. It gave Labour a 22-point lead. But it was, clear pathway to victory, dump Sunak and put someone properly conservative in his place, and you might have a chance at getting those people to get up off their hands and vote Tory on election day.
Yeah, I still think they could with a different leader. I didn't think they would change leader. I still don't think they will. But looking at that by-election, I really think they do have to. But it's unfortunate for Sunak because there's not much sympathy left for the Tories, of course, but he probably is fairly conservative in his instincts. He probably is more conservative than he appears, but they need someone who appears conservative at this point. I mean, he's got Hunt in there, which is a problem. He's got Cameron in there, which is a problem. So of course he looks like a wet. I'm not sure he necessarily is in his beliefs, but he just seems like a managerial Blairite wet type, even if he's not. And whether he can achieve anything conservative is the question. So it perhaps doesn't even matter how he seems. But yeah, if they brought in someone, a Truss or even a Boris or a Kemi or any number of other people, not Penny, which would be a disaster. There's any number of people that would seem more conservative, even if they. I mean, is Boris more conservative than Sunak? I mean, I don't think he is, but he would seem like he is, or is more populist somehow.
Yeah. No, but he didn't actually do anything that was noticeably more conservative than any. I mean, he got Brexit done, I suppose, but then Rishi Sunak might have got Brexit done too. He voted for Brexit, and it was pretty much inevitable that whoever won the 2019 election was going to get Brexit done, insofar as Boris did. But apart from that, I can't think of a single thing that Boris did that was, in my view, a properly conservative piece of legislation. I mean, Rishi's big problem is the small boats and his inability to do anything about them. Someone did throw a spanner into the works. My plan was to, I have this fantasy that he'll be replaced by Kemi Badenoch in a coronation, and she'll then quickly corner a snap election on the single issue of whether to take Britain out of the European Convention on Human Rights, because only if we do that can we get rid of the small boats. But someone pointed out that apparently the Rwandans have said, if you withdraw from the convention, then we're not going to take any of your asylum seekers and process them in Rwanda. So if they did withdraw from the convention, that wouldn't necessarily enable planes to take off to take asylum seekers to Rwanda. They'd have to, take them somewhere else. But so it sort of makes it slightly more complicated.
Okay. Well, that story is fairly serious. So maybe we'll move on to a more sort of funny story. Well, it's still awful. It's the woke Overground lies. But Toby, first, do you want to quickly do our first advert today?
Yeah. So this is an ad from the Mighty Thor. And so Some say they miss Thor's bad jokes. So here's a joke. How do you punish a narcissist? Stop voting for them. Narcissists hate being ignored. Instead of feeding the narcissist politician's 3 Ds, defensiveness, dismissiveness, and dominance, by acknowledging the mess they make with your precious attention, take one of Thor's coaching sessions, which focus on areas you can control, using, among other things, the 3 Ds of business storytelling: detail, description, and dialogue. Thor can help you build stronger presentations, pitches, speeches, and tell a confident self story. M&A specialist Jonathan says, Thor gave me a new paradigm of communication and the confidence to make the most of my experiences. The situation that I was left in with a difficult internal narrative when looking for a job post-COVID, Thor was able to give me a framework for thinking about how to answer questions, to tease the important details relevant to my circumstances, and give me the confidence that my values and experience were not only relevant, but in demand and useful. I am now consistently able to speak in a way that makes an impact and inspires others. Read 84 similar recommendations on Thor's LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/ThorHolt, or to swap bad jokes, contact Thor on WhatsApp on +44 07906 321 593. That's +44 07906 321 593. And the details of how to contact Thor will, of course, be below the podcast on your favorite podcasting app.
All right, thank you to Thor. Now let's go on to this next story, which is Sadiq Khan's woke overground lines. So I'm sure you've seen it. Sadiq Khan has renamed these 6 lines, and he's got the Liberty line, the Lioness line, the Mildmay line, the Suffragette, Weaver, and Windrush lines. And it's just a kind of open provocation to the good people of this country. And it's cost about 6.3 million, they reckon. And you think, where are these names even from? Lioness is pretty obvious. We all know that's women's football. The Sadiq's sacred thing that we all have to worship. Famously, if you don't like women's football, you get called mate and you get put in prison immediately. And there's a whole video campaign about it. And the Liberty line, I was like, what's that about? Well, it's about general independence and liberty, but it's also about the independence of Havering, apparently. It was quite obscure. Mildmay is to do with a small charitable hospital in Shoreditch, which played an important role during the HIV/AIDS crisis in the 1980s. So you've got a sort of AIDSy line in there. You've got the suffragettes, of course, violent terrorists. You've got the Weaver, which is the textile industry, and it goes through certain textile-y places. And you've got Windrush, which of course we all know about, and that goes through certain windrushy places. So they're all related to the places they go through, but they're all about as woke as could possibly be. And I mean, look, I suppose, look, you've got liberty. I guess who can argue with liberty? But then you've got women's football, AIDS, feminism, textiles, and immigration, basically. I mean, is that about right?
That's about right. It is quite shocking because it's like, is no space, are there no public amenities that are untouched now by politics? And you think there'd be, I mean, by convention, we don't kind of take the opportunity to kind of splash our political we all over things like underground lines, overground lines, to score political points. I mean, and one of the reasons for that is that, of course, if there's a Tory successor one day to Sadiq Khan, they could rename all these lines after great victors in British military campaigns, or the Kings and Queens of England, which used to be the convention. So
You
it just
to
seems
spell
like
out Sadiq Khan is a prick across all 6. How many words is that? Sadiq Khan is a prick. Okay, you need one more line, an effing prick, and that could be the 6 lines. That's quite creative.
But there are some parts of our lives that we don't want to be infected by partisan political point scoring. It's just so cheap and unnecessary to come up with these woke names for underground lines. It's like, leave us alone. There must be some part of our lives which are commonly shared, which we can forget about our political differences and come together as a people. We don't want to be constantly told that everything, even down to the train line we're traveling on is kind of tainted by which side you're on in the culture war. And I guess we also should the people on Sadiq Khan's side are always criticizing people like us for waging these culture war battles. Then they go and do something like this. I mean,
Yeah.
what could be more designed to stoke the culture war than to name tube lines after overground lines after the suffragettes? The Lionesses. I mean, the Lionesses. Okay, they did well in the Euros. They've never won a World Cup. The men's team have. Don't they get any recognition?
Right, great point. Yeah, the men's team, 1966 line. Where's that exactly?
Yeah.
I mean, look, Toby. Yeah, they always gaslight. Of course, they know they're fighting culture wars. They snigger behind closed doors at like, oh, look, we're waging a secret culture war and saying it's them. I'm sure, but yeah, look, if you think about the existing lines, at least on the tube, this is the Overground. When you think about the tube, right, you've got Central Line, Piccadilly, Victoria, Northern. These are just very generic direction. This one's north, goes to the north side of London, so it's Northern. Piccadilly goes past Piccadilly, so you've got the Circle Line, Hammersmith and City, King's Cross. These are all very simple. But then
Waterloo,
you've got,
I like that one.
yeah. Then you've got, if you think about it, you do have the Elizabeth line, obviously because of Queen Elizabeth II. I suppose you've got the Jubilee line, presumably related to the Jubilee, but that's about as political as it gets, which is the absolute most generic. The Queen. Even that, of course, is controversial for some really lefty people. But as you say, they're not political, except in the absolute most sort of minuscule possible way of it, that they acknowledge the Queen, which is barely even a political statement. So you're right. So this is sort of unprecedented as far as I know. And especially, I mean, it is bizarre that have the AIDS one in there, the suffragettes. And I know the suffragettes are thought to be this uncontroversially good thing, but of course, that depends on how you feel about feminism and how you feel about their methods. And I would question them. But I suppose
Well, there were
Windrush.
plenty of. Well, yeah, I think you can be, in favour of women's suffrage without being in favour of the suffragettes, who were, lawbreakers. They went beyond civil disobedience, and there were plenty of people who supported women's suffrage at that time who didn't have any sympathy with the tactics of the suffragettes, like some people who support, net zero but don't support Extinction Rebellion or Just Stop Oil. It's like Sadiq Khan signalling that JSO and XR have his complete support. He's in favour of, breaking the law in order to bring about your political objectives. You can't do it through the ballot box.
Yeah, and it's a bit odd that one of them jumped in front of a horse, which of course was the mode of transport at the time. So, do you really want to encourage that when you've got a line? What if people start jumping in front of the suffragette line in tribute? Not saying it'll happen, Toby, but it could happen. This is the kind of thing that wokeness gone mad. I don't know. Windrush people are fairly affectionate about. There was the recent Windrush scandal, which makes it kind of more controversial and political. The Theresa May one, the original one was fairly anodyne. I don't know if people are going to get too worked up about Weaver, but yeah, it's the whole thing, and especially I suppose no one wants anyone to die of AIDS either, but it's just like it's just so perfectly lefty and political, isn't it? And just trying to represent everyone. Okay, we've got women, we've got, I suppose, gay people, we've got immigrants via Windrush, we've got text. I mean, where's the working class average man line? What line do they? There's no. What about a Churchill line or a sort of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or what could we have
Wellington
as a
line.
line to represent us?
Yeah, a Falklands line.
Falklands line. Thatcher line. Yeah, there's loads of good ideas. Yeah, Thatcher line. What else could we have? I mean, what line? People can write in and tell us what line would represent them. Gammon line would be a nice one.
That's what maybe Sadiq Khan, in his defence, would say, "What about Boris Bikes? He was claiming credit for a public amenity connected to transport.
Were they officially called Boris
branded
Bikes?
That. I'm not sure they were, actually, but he certainly claimed credit for them. And apparently the person who deserved the real credit was Ken Livingstone. But yeah, somehow he managed to brand them Boris Bikes. But I don't think it was actually ever part of the official branding. So you're right.
I am right. They were called Santander Cycles or something. They were not called Boris Bikes officially. They were colloquially known as Boris Bikes. So yeah, it's not the same. What would be equivalent is literally calling one of these the Boris line. And someone said, I'm surprised he hasn't got the Sadiq line in there. He must have been tempting, but he's basically got 6 Sadiq lines.
Yeah.
Is Sadiq Khan the ultimate evil? Is he just? Well, let's find out. Let's ask more about Sadiq Khan. I mean, because we've got 2 more spin-off Sadiq Khan stories. One of them is that he's blocked, and this is perfect since we were just talking about the Queen. He's blocked a statue of our beloved Queen Elizabeth II in Trafalgar Square until 2030. He's effectively blocked it because he's commissioned woke art to go there instead. So he signed off on the empty 4th plinth where campaigners hope to erect the statue of the beloved late monarch for woke art until the end of the decade. The first piece to go up for 6 months will be a fixture of 850 faces of trans people who were mostly sex workers. You can't make that up. I mean, that's just that's beyond parody. No, we can't have the Queen. We've got to have 850 dead trans workers. Are they dead? I don't know. Trans sex workers. I mean, it couldn't get more absurd.
Yeah. It's
We've kept this out of peak woke because it's such a big story, but that's as peak woke as it gets.
It is, yeah. And you would have thought that at some point, Londoners, even if they're inclined to vote Labour, even if they voted for Sadiq Khan, would balk at this kind of politicisation of all these public spaces, particularly the kind of the snub he's delivered to the beloved late Queen. Yeah, he really is a ghastly, horrible little man, isn't he?
I mean, we shouldn't say little to because people attack you for high, but he certainly seems to be. Can you call someone pure evil, or is that defamation? I mean, and it does beg the question.
Do you think? Wait a minute.
Satirically,
you can call him pure evil. I can call him little.
No, because I just thought we should attack his height. But you might not have meant height. You might have meant his character. You might have meant his.
I meant he was a small man metaphorically.
I just meant you were opening the door for people to call you a fetus or something again. You know, I didn't want that to happen to you. But look, I mean, yeah, certainly, I think objectively it seems that he is the ultimate evil. But it does beg the question as well: what is the Queen equivalent to 850 trans sex workers? You know, is that the ratio? Like one statue of the Queen versus 850. I'd say it's probably
how are they going to
still off.
How are they going to get 850? How's it going to work exactly? Is it going to be one statue with a changing face, or is it going to be 850 statues?
Yeah, good question. I don't. It's not 850 statues, is it? Surely, isn't it just loads of faces on a big, some sort of
projected
big
onto a screen,
trans mural of dead sex workers? Are they dead? I keep saying they're dead. I have no idea.
Maybe they're not. Maybe they'll be plying their wares on this kind of big screen.
Like they're life masks. I knew I'd seen this. So they're all like life masks. I don't know if the viewer can see it, but they're all a load of masks. Maybe we can drop this in post-production. Probably not. But it's Teresa Margol's Improntas features casts of the faces of 850 trans people from London and around the world. So I don't know. It's a skull rack. It's based on a skull rack from Mesoamerican civilizations. So it's even more woke because the structure of it or the concept is based on a so-called skull rack. So we've got a skull rack of 850 trans sex workers. It's in place of our beloved Queen. I mean, could you be any more conquered? I mean, I'm laughing at this. It's so disgusting and absurd. It's so ridiculous. Mesopotamian dead trans skulls where the Queen should be.
This is Sadiq Khan rubbing our faces in it, isn't it? It's like saying, I am the victor. Bow down and worship me. Know your place. It's just, it couldn't be more vindictive or spiteful or kind of, it's like the kind of worst kind of cheap culture war politics. Exactly the kind of thing they accuse the Tories of doing.
Yeah, and he's rubbing our skulls in the skull rack. And there's a picture here of the artist wearing a mask inevitably. She's Mexican as well. You know, not there's anything wrong with that, but you know, not British. So it's a foreign artist with 850 trans sex workers in a skull rack inspired by Mesoamerican. I guess that's where the Mexican part comes in. I mean, I can't really say anything else. I'm speechless. This is peak woke.
I don't think we could ever top that. That's the ultimate peak work, isn't it?
And then he said there was one other Sadiq Khan story this week, which is this anti-Semitic slip that he did. He said, a party like mine that is proud to be both anti-racist and but also anti-Semitic. And then the guy wrapped up and went, well, thank you, Sadiq Khan, blah, blah, blah. He went, tackling anti-Semitism. So he got carried away with because it was quite alliterative, anti-racist and anti-Semitic. That's Labour Party. And he absolutely nailed it. That is what the Labour Party is. They believe in the doctrine of anti-racism, aka hating white people, and they believe in anti-Semitism.
Yeah, and the Labour's attempt at damage control was to point out that when the Tories reproduced this clip, they left out the bit at the end in which Sadiq Khan says, "Oh, I mean, opposed to campaigning against anti-Semitism," and it's like, well, yeah, but you still made a terrible gaffe, even if they did leave out your attempt to correct it. You know, it doesn't take away from the fact that you made this. You know, you said the quiet part out loud, like it or not.
Well, that was the tweet. So the Conservative Twitter page, which kind of goes off piece quite a lot, doesn't it? You could sort of wonder who's running it. You sent it to someone young, and they've just said to them, "Just try and save our party," and you get some absolutely bonkers posts, X posts out of them. Yeah, and they shared this with the caption, "Sadiq Khan says the quiet part out loud," and that was a bit sneaky because you could argue because he wasn't confessing, he was just making a mistake, but he was in another sense, it was a Freudian slip because that is what they are. So I don't know. So you thought that was exactly they got really slammed for that tweet, but did you think it
Yeah,
was or exposed? Did you think it was ethically sound or not?
I think the fact that it sailed quite close to the wind, I think is premeditated. They put out these tweets and they attach these controversial captions or whatever, and that provokes controversy and creates a row. It means that it then gets talked about on LBC, Talk TV, GB News. Columnists weigh in the papers. We talk about it on the Weekly Sceptic, and it gives the gaff, much more airplay than it would otherwise get. So I think it's deliberate. It's a way of amplifying the other side when they're making a mistake.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's not exactly the caption I'd have gone for, but I think it's fair game. Then there was all this weird kind of debate about they edited it. It was an edited clip or it was an edited piece, like as if they kind of gone in and kind of it was like a deep fake, and really they're just taking the bit off the end. I mean, that's a pretty normal thing to do in a clip. It's not exactly heavily edited, is it?
No, you don't need an AI to remove the bit when
Sadiq
goes, "Oh no, I didn't mean that. I meant something else." Yeah,
yeah. Any child could edit that bit out because it was. I mean, at least it was funny that he realized in time, but he only realized after they were ending the segment as well, which is beautiful as well. I mean, I'd have even been, if I'd have done the clip, I'd have been tempted to even leave in the bit where the guy starts to wrap up, because that makes it look even more like he's ended the statement. Thank you, Sadiq Khan.
Yeah.
That is your official view. It's only after that he goes, attack the Alexei. Anyway, anyone can make a gaffe, but it's just funny that he revealed what we all know about Labour already, and which is that that's what they are. Can we say that's what they are? Is that defamation, Toby? You need to tell me these things because I'm going to get myself in all sorts of trouble again. It would appear to some
corporate defamation, which would be defaming a political party, is, as I understand it, it's you're on much safer ground.
Okay, well, satirically, it could appear to some that Labour have had some issues with accusations of anti-Semitism. Did that rescue me? I don't know. I don't know.
Fine, yeah.
All right, shall I quickly do our second advert? We have quite a few adverts today. Thank you very much for everyone for the support. So this one comes from the Live-In Care Company, who say, are you worried about parents or a loved one who are finding it more and more difficult to take care of themselves, or who may be living with a condition such as dementia or Parkinson's? Are you starting to think about a residential care home, but the very thought doesn't sit right? At the Live-In Care Company, we truly believe that home is the best place to receive care from an expert carer of your choice and on a one-to-one basis. Home is always a more calm, healthy, and happier place to be. So for more information about Live-In Care, please go to thelivincarecompany.co.uk or call them for a no-obligation conversation on 0118 914 5300, and they'll be happy to help. That is 0118 914 5300, or email thelivincarecompany.co.uk. And thank you very much to them for sponsoring. So, Toby, let's see. We've got a bit of time on the free content. Should we do this Navalny story, or should we do Pete work? What do you think?
Let's do the Navalny story and then go to Pete work.
We're giving you so much free content, guys. We're being so nice here to all the free, because we do appreciate you coming on this journey with us. But anyway, well, let's do the. So Navalny,
I guess
go on.
Some people listening to this will be premium subscribers as well, watching this. So we ought to say thank you to them in particular for becoming premium subscribers.
Yeah, thank you to them even
more. They
will
get to even more, and they will get to listen or to watch the remainder of the podcast, the premium content, which we tag on at the end. I think it's going to be at least half an hour today.
Oh yeah, we're going to do loads of stuff. We've got Trump trainers, we've got X-Files, we've got loads of stuff. But let's just quickly do Navalny then, who he was sadly died, and it was a bit suspicious because he was fine, he was in good humor, people said. Then one day he was he was just suddenly felt ill walking around the prison, and then that was it. Very suspicious, of course. No one officially knows what it. Last I checked, and it's going to be very hard to know about that exactly what happened. But there's also the sort of dialogue around it and the controversy of Tucker. I mean, people are trying to blame Tucker Carlson now for everything, but he did have a few unfortunate things. He'd just done this piece in Russia where he's going grocery shopping and he's finding that things are cheaper in Russia, and he's going, "This is so cheap. I can't believe this would cost $400 in the US, but it costs 100 here." I mean, it makes it radicalizing me. And people are just pointing out, well, yeah, but you earn a lot less in Russia, so that's not particularly relevant. And he's talking about how nice the city is, and people have seen this. I mean, my friend Callum did a piece on Russia, and you see the train stations are very nice, and it maintains a certain grandeur that we've lost with some of our brutalist artwork and architecture. So, but Tucker was talking about the grocery shopping, and he'd also put out this video before Navalny died, where he said that leadership requires killing people. Now, people have taken offense to this. It was in an interview, but really, to me, that was just completely reasonable what he was saying. It was a point. He goes, leadership requires killing people. That's one reason I wouldn't want to do it. He adds, that's a reason I wouldn't want to do it. So if you want to go full context, we're just speaking about clips and their full context. He says that's why I wouldn't want to do it. But he says my leader kills people. All leaders kill people. And that is pretty much incontrovertible. I mean, all leaders kill. Context is a thing. They may kill with a drone strike or in a war context rather than poison a guy, but they still do kill people, and it's a responsibility of leadership. What do you think, Toby?
Yeah. Well, that only works as a defense of Putin if you elide killing people with murdering them. I mean, yes, most leaders authorize killing of one kind or another. Most, I think, in a lawful way. But this, what seemingly, was done to Navalny on Putin's orders was outright murder, political assassination, and that seems to be different to anything Biden might be guilty of. Maybe not, the leader of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but certainly, I don't know of any comparable episode in Biden's presidency. This is another order of magnitude, and pretty kind of despicable. He was the opposition leader with the most gravitas. He'd been imprisoned on trumped-up charges, held in solitary confinement, and eventually murdered, seemingly on Putin's orders. It shows just, I think, it was sort of unfortunate, I think, for Tucker, that it happened so soon after the interview. It was as though it just made it seem. I mean, I don't think Tucker was trying to kind of apologize for Putin, but his failure to kind of challenge him, and the fact that he allowed him to present as just another statesman, just another political leader, and didn't kind of tease out just how monstrous and what a tyrant he is. I think this brings home to everyone that Putin really is like one of the kind of 20th century dictators of old. He has no qualms about murdering his political opponents, and it's as though the kind of mask he tried to wear in the Tucker interview, which Tucker did little to try and pull off, has now kind of fallen away, and we see this kind of hideous gargoyle beneath.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure he really wore a mask in the interview, or if we ever didn't know what he was. Yeah, Tucker could have done better in the interview, but he has said he doesn't like Putin, but he's just being realistic that all leaders have to kill people. Yeah, I've seen some people even suggest that Putin's interview itself was part of this, somehow caused this, or is causally related to this killing, which seems pretty ludicrous, especially because Navalny's been, I think there's been attempts like this before, and he's already in a prison in the Arctic Circle. I mean, it's not as if this persecution of Navalny is new. As people thought he was in this kind of danger for a long time. So I find that very questionable. But yes, the timing is strange. Now, speaking of trumped up charges, Trump compared it, of course, to himself. He said, "The sudden death of Alexei Navalny has made me more and more aware of what is happening in our country. It is a slow, steady progression with crooked, radical left politicians, prosecutors, and judges leading us down a path to destruction." So, is he suggesting there that his treatment is a bit like Navalny? It does sound like that. I mean, and they are going a different route. What they're going down the route of such absurd penalties on Trump, amounting to around 400 million last I checked, with all these absurd judgments. I mean, there was a Babylon Bee. So yeah, I mean, 354.9 million he's just been fined, and with interest and other costs, it will get to more than 450. And then there's the E. Jean Carroll one, which is 83.3 million. So they are just completely finding him into oblivion and doing everything they can. I mean, it's a different method, but I can see where Trump's coming from a little bit. Whereas Biden, on the other hand, used this to try and drum up more funding for Ukraine. There's this $95 billion aid package that includes funds for Ukraine, but Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, is refusing to bring it up for a vote and is demanding a meeting with Biden. So Biden's used this to try and say, look, we need to win this war and we need to do more to attack Putin. And of course, the Republicans are a bit sick of all this kind of stuff because they've had the neocon era of Bush Jr. and Cheney, and they're now more isolationist. And what I've never really heard is the Democrats making the case to the average American and to the Republicans and saying, look, we're in this new world order. If Russia sides with China and then Iran's in there somewhere, that's not going to lead to more prosperity, freedom, or safety for the average American. But I never hear that case. You could make that case, but I don't hear that case made. I hear them called MAGA semi-fascist and stuff like that. I mean, why would you want to? If you're an American looking at this war, why would you really want to fund it if you're just an ordinary American and you've had enough of all the American foreign wars? I think I can see that. But do you really think the case has been made properly to the American citizen of why they should be funding Ukraine? And do you think Trump is like Navalny?
Yeah, I can't really. I mean, I can see why Trump would argue that he is the victim of a vindictive political victor who is taking advantage of the levers at his disposal to try and eliminate him as an opponent. But there's still a big gap between Putin's treatment of Navalny and Biden's treatment of Trump. I think more likely, and also I think Trump has sort of complained and claimed that this is a outside the conventional normal political behavior. If you win an election, you're not supposed to try and persecute the loser through the courts and bankrupt them, go after them in the way that Democrats seemingly have gone after Trump. But you don't get the impression for a second that if Trump wins, he'll hesitate about using what powers he has as, the president to persecute, go after his political opponents, including Biden. It's quite. He sort of tries to want to take the high ground, and that's sort of what he's doing in part by comparing himself to Navalny. This is just an illegitimate abuse of the political process that Biden's engaging in here, just like Putin in Russia. But it's not very credible because that Trump would probably behave even worse in the White House than Biden and his allies are behaving now.
Well, can I just answer that? I mean, one thing on that is he didn't react worse last time. He was very soft once he got in. Maybe this time, having been through all this, he would be harsher. One hopes he would go scorched earth. And you could also argue that is just, I'm pretty sure it's elites theory that suggests that really power is just about whoever the people are in power, whoever gets in power, they just behave the same way and they don't, Lenin or whoever it is, they have these ideals. When you get in power, you always just behave the same, and it's always dictated by who is in power. I'm badly fudging this because I'm just half remembering a theoretical position, but I think Trump should do that if he gets in. I think that's what he should do. I mean, at this point he should come in, go full dictator, and get them all back. But anyway, that's a whole other debate.
Well, the truth is Trump seems to kind of. His position is slightly incoherent, and he sort of oscillates between whatever suits him to say at the time. So on the one hand, he tries to take the moral high ground and criticize Biden for breaching these political norms by using the court to try and punish him. But on the other hand, he then says, "I'll be a dictator if you elect me," and makes no bones about the fact that he will try and wreak revenge on all of these people who've tortured him. And so it's sort of he sort of also he sort of seems to kind of switch, kind of like someone weaving all over the highway, between taking the high ground and going low.
Yeah, but one last thing I'd like to add is that I'm not. I mean, the January 6th prisoners. That's a pretty bad thing. Is it the same as Navalny? Maybe not. But there was a guy who was hit with such ludicrous charges. His charges were elevated, was sort of escalated to the point where he was suddenly going to face, from a fairly minor charge, he was suddenly going to face 9 years, and he killed himself. I mean, how different is that? I mean, it's not exactly the same as Navalny, but it is political intimidation of citizens who haven't really done very much, to the point where they feel compelled to take their own life. And then there's the other ones who have just languished in prison for ages without trials and in solitary confinement and so on. I mean, the treatment of January 6th people has been an absolute scandal, surely.
No, it has been scandalous, but still not quite as scandalous as Putin's murder of Navalny. There was an interesting postscript to this story. One of the things that Putin said, I think we discussed it last week in his interview with Carlson, which Carlson didn't challenge him on, was Putin said that the Kremlin had never threatened the West or Ukraine with a nuclear strike, a first strike. And only this week, Dmitry Medvedev, who is a close Putin ally and who was the president between 2008 and 2012, and when he speaks is generally regarded as speaking for the Kremlin, he kind of unleashed this barrage of threats a couple of days ago, in which he said that if Russia is forced to return to the borders it had in 1991 following the collapse of the Soviet Union, it would unleash thermonuclear Armageddon on the world. He said, attempts to return Russia to the borders of 1991 will lead to only one thing, towards a global war with Western countries using the entire strategic arsenal of our state in Kiev, Berlin, London, Washington. So it's sort of so odd that Putin can kind of try and maintain this facade that he is this reasonable, statesman-like leader, and then the very next week murder his kind of leading political opponent and threaten the West again with kind of nuclear Armageddon if they don't withdraw from Kiev.
Yeah, but he knows a lot about history, and he's anti-woke. Yeah. I mean, yes, it is a bit absurd. Yeah, I give you that one. Okay, well, that is the Navalny story. We didn't have too much time for it, but we've covered the main points. So, Toby, would you like to read our third ad before we do everyone's favourite section?
Yes. So this is an ad from our beloved producer, Jason. And we call him the Podfather. So here's an ad from the Podfather. Ever imagined launching your own podcast or elevating an existing one to unprecedented heights? Introducing Podscapers, the architects behind celebrated shows like The Weekly Sceptic and The Current Thing. Boasting over 30 years of audio-visual mastery and 2 decades in podcasting, Podscapers transcends the typical partnership. They're the foundation upon which podcasting success is built. Led by Jason, the team at Podscapers navigates the intricate podcasting landscape with precision, ensuring your show stands out in a saturated market. They provide end-to-end support, from choosing the ideal hosting platform to refining your production to crystal clear quality. Their expertise empowers you to focus on what truly matters, captivating your audience with your own unique voice. Podscapers' distinction lies in their unwavering commitment to nurturing relationships, deeply understanding your vision, and materializing it into an audible reality. They're adept at steering podcasters through the intricacies of growth and monetization, devising strategies that harmonize with your brand's essence. Whether you're at the dawn of your podcasting adventure or seeking to propel your existing show to new heights, Podscapers has got you covered. Their dedication has been pivotal to us, illustrating that with the right partnership, achieving the zenith of podcasting success is within reach. Embark on your podcasting journey with Podscapers. Visit podscapers.com to connect with Jason and his team. Let them elevate your podcast from a mere concept to a resounding success story. With Podscapers, your podcasting aspirations are not just achievable, they're inevitable. And I guess we can give Jason a big thumbs up, can't we, Nick? He's been an excellent producer of this show, never complains, extremely professional, extremely conscientious, does everything on time and to a very high standard. So big endorsement from us for podscapers.com.
Yeah, I have to say, Jason's been incredibly reliable and just a great guy as well. So definitely work with Jason. And my only criticism is his advert should be a bit longer. But other than that, yeah, Jason's absolutely great. So definitely work with him. Top recommendation from the Weekly Sceptic. And he's helped us get to whatever we get to. What is it, 1.4 million downloads or something crazy? So yeah, absolutely. And
the only non-woke podcast to break into the top 5 in Apple's British politics podcast chart.
There you go. Largely thanks to Jason, actually. He's done most of it. The rest is me and a tiny bit Toby. All right. Well, now let's go to everyone's favourite section, which is Peak Woke. So, Toby, Peak Woke this week. I've got so many. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, you've got quite a few as well. Shall I just start with one here? Michelangelo's creation of man is dubbed the symbol of white supremacy. So Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility, I'm sure you're familiar with this unfortunate lady. And she looked at this creation of man, which is also known as the creation of Adam, because actually that's its real title, Adamo originally. But she looked at it and said, oh, you know, the one where God is in a cloud and there's all these angels and he's reaching out and he's touching. I don't know who that is, David or something. It's like, no, it's Adam. It's in the name. And God is white and David's white and the angels are white. That's the perfect convergence of white supremacy and patriarchy, right? It's like, it's white. So the Philistinism of the woke, I mean, absolutely stunning. Now they want to destroy our art, all the great art, not just our art, but Europe's art. And call it patriarchal and white supremacy because God's white and Adam's white. I mean,
and presumably she wants to replace it with something like a mural depicting She-Hulk attorney at law, or something.
Or 850 trans skulls. You think? By the way, why is trans? I've just thought, why is that a celebration of trans? If I said, guys, there's 850 trans skulls here, most of them were sex workers, you'd be like, Nick, if you killed 850 trans sex workers and piled their skulls up, I was like, well, yeah. I mean, when I hear 850 trans skulls, I don't know why I didn't say this earlier. Don't you think that sounds like a mass slaughter?
It does. It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a celebration of trans sex workers, does it? But what's so funny about Robin DiAngelo attacking Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel is what do they want to substitute it with? What's their woke cultural alternative? They don't have any kind of cultural hinterland. They don't. What genius artists can they point to in their column as if to say, join our team? We have better art than your team. It's like, you think there'd be some degree of self-awareness. I mean, at some point, cancelling people like Michelangelo, it's got to dawn on them, isn't particularly smart. I mean, how many more geniuses do you want to kind of, consign to our team? It's not doing your cause a huge amount of good. Who have we got now? We've got Shakespeare, and now Michelangelo, Darwin, presumably will shortly be cancelled. We've got Roald Dahl, Ian Fleming. I think Jane Austen was attacked the other day.
I'm sure we've got Chaucer. I don't need to check.
I think, Chaucer, yeah. It's like...
but they don't care about art. They're ideologues. They care about ideology. They don't care about art, do they?
Well, that's pretty clear, yeah.
Go on, Toby. Do you want to do one? We've got so many. Let's smash.
Yeah. Okay. So so there was a great headline in the Telegraph: "Women in armed forces feel unsafe after Grant Shapps comments." So, according to the Telegraph, women in the armed forces have been made to feel unsafe in the wake of the Defence Secretary's comments over the diversity row engulfing the military. So, Grant Shapps warned that a woke and extremist culture had infiltrated the British Army after it was revealed that the army were considering ways to relax checks on foreigners applying to join the army, including in the intelligence corps, in order to meet their diversity quotas. And he said he wanted to put an end to this approach and introduce some common sense into the armed forces and dispense with this woke gobbledygook. And as a response, women serving in the British Army have said that if this approach is going to be adopted, they'll feel unsafe. And it's like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be facing down our enemies. We're supposed to be relying on you to face down, Putin's special forces when they try and invade Sweden, and you're called up as part of the NATO defense force. You're supposed to be proving to us that you're every bit as deadly and as scary to the enemies massing at our borders as men would be, white working class men. And yet here you are saying that a few minor political points scored by Grant Shapps have made you feel unsafe. It's like, if that makes you feel unsafe, you're not going to be much good guarding the wall, are you? I mean, it's just ludicrous. But one thought did occur to me, which a point I have esprit de scalier about last week, Nick, which is we were talking about the kind of wokeification of the British Army, and if they're now just recruiting kind of pink-haired, trans sex workers with kind of lots of piercings, instead of, white working class Millwall supporters to kind of be the backbone of the British Army, that's it, game over. We might as well just, roll out the red carpet for Putin and the Chinese. Actually, thinking about it, the kind of woke women, as is indicated by their response to Grant Shapps' fairly mild remarks, they're full of rage, aren't they? They're incredibly angry and they're unbelievably vicious. They don't hesitate to pile on. They don't hesitate to try and cancel someone, rob them of their livelihood if they make the slightest ideological infraction. They get worked up about men who don't kind of applaud women's football. I mean, they're angry about so many things. They're full of rage. They're vicious. Actually, maybe they might make pretty good soldiers. Maybe they should be guarding the wall. I mean, maybe they're actually even more vicious and deadly and ruthless and angry than your average Millwall supporter. So maybe we should think twice about this wokeification of the armed forces being a bad thing. Maybe they're just the people we need to keep us safe at night.
It's a good argument. They are physically weak, of course, and ineffective. So probably they have to end up being the people behind the scenes making the decisions, just ruthlessly sending people in. But then you've got woke people sending in men to their death. So I don't like that either. Yeah, I'm not sure. They could be used. I suppose they could be used as sort of torturers because they just have no empathy and they're evil. So you could use them for like interrogations, maybe.
Yeah, about drone operators, no
Right.
risk that they'll hesitate because there's a woman kind of breastfeeding a baby next to the terrorist leader. Yeah, they'll just pull the trigger.
Yeah. It's incredibly dark. What about this one? Cathedral apologizes as transgender activist eulogized at funeral as mother of all whores. This took place at St. Patrick's in Manhattan. This sacrilegious funeral where mourners clad in fishnet stockings and miniskirts danced in the aisles, and they were praising this sex worker. Speaking of trans sex workers, I think this was one of the skulls that ended up in that artwork. This person was called the mother of all whores, and people are like, how can this take place in a Catholic cathedral? And this, of course, comes after Canterbury Cathedral had the silent disco. So it's just a continued desecration of Christianity. The difference here is that they didn't seem to know this was taking place and they weren't funding it. They were horrified as well, I believe.
Yeah, it's like we're going to see. It's like the Catholic diocese in New York said, we're going to see your silent disco and raise you
Mother of all whores.
A funeral for the mother of all whores. Yeah, it's which reminds me of another peak woke, Nick, last week, or maybe it was early. It was an NHS trust claims that natural breast milk is actually no better for babies than trans women's milk. So in a letter to campaigners, the University of Sussex, it would be the University of Sussex Hospitals NHS Trust, said that milk produced by trans women, that is men, after taking a combination of drugs is, quote, comparable to that produced following the birth of a baby. So they're claiming, and this doesn't sound like it's going to hold up to much scientific scrutiny, that if you pump men full of enough drugs, they can actually produce some kind of milk from their male breasts that is every bit as good for newborns as mother's milk. It's just amazing, extraordinary, isn't it?
Wow. That is incredible. And that kind of reminds me of another one I have, only vaguely, which is unions criticise demeaning gift bag for menopausal staff at Avanti West Coast. Now, I'm not sure if the peak woke here is the bag itself or the protest against the bag, but this was a bag actually designed, it turns out, by menopausal women, for menopausal women. And it was just a bit of fun, really. It's sort of fun encouragement. It included a fan for hot sweats, a jelly baby sweet in case you feel like biting someone's head off, a tissue if you're feeling a bit emotional, and a paperclip to help you keep it all together. So it was just a kind of, it was like it's been called an insulting gimmick. But I think this was actually just menopausal women trying to put, I'm going to be really woke here myself and say this was just menopausal women trying to put the issue on the map. And they were just saying, hey, these are some fun items to make you think about it. But this union has now said, no, it's appalling. The Transport Salaried Staffs Association said the pact was appalling, demeaning, and dismissive, and it added women deserve informed support and respect from their employers, not belittlement, even though this was designed by menopausal women. And I just think at least they're getting the issue on the map. If it was a bag for white men, they'd just say stick the bag over your head because and off yourself, because that's what they think of us. So I think they're getting much better treatment than us, but this is still an insulting gimmick. What do you think, Toby?
Yeah, it's like they're easily insulted, is what I think.
Well,
they should try walking in our shoes for a week. Did you see the Scots? There's been a row in Scotland, which is the Redcoat Cafe, which is the name of the cafe in Edinburgh Castle, should, according to the SNP, be renamed. And they've started a campaign. And in their campaign literature, they say the Redcoats played a significant role in subjugating Scotland and suppressing its peoples during periods of history marked by conflict and strife. It's like, no, the Redcoats is a synonym for the British Army during the colonial era, because they wore red coats so they could be seen more easily by people on their own side, so they wouldn't shoot them with muskets. But the backbone of the British Army during, the pomp of the British Empire were the Scottish regiments. I mean, they wore their red coats with pride, and they were some of the most ferocious fighters, some of the bravest, most indomitable battalions. So the notion that it's just the English that the name Redcoats is associated with is typical of the kind of distortion of history engaged in by these ghastly ethno-nationalists north of the border.
Okay, well, speaking of redcoats, maybe I'll chuck this one in here. Labour vows to eliminate fox hunting. I'm sure people have seen that Shadow Environment Secretary Steve Reed has promised to close loopholes in this hunting act, which is already a Blair thing, the 2004 Hunting Act, introduced by Blair's administration. We're still living in Blair's world, and we're now in this sort of decaying country. We're in a culture war. We have immigration, we have cost of living, we have inflation, we have every possible issue facing us. Wars in Russia, in Gaza, and in in Yemen now, and all this kind of. We got everything's kicking off around the world and domestically, and yet they want to bring back this ancient proto-culture war issue, you could call it, of fox hunting and attack people in the country, attack the Shire, attack the good old English rural people, including, in a way, my people in the lakes, although the hunting's a bit less posh there, but they do hunt. And they want to attack hunting once again and kick this sort of just about twitching body of hunting into the dirt, Toby.
Yeah, I thought there was typical kind of politics of class envy being engaged in by Labour because it won't cost them anything. But there was quite a good comment by the chief executive of the Countryside Alliance, which of course campaigned against the hunting ban. And he said, It is utterly bizarre that Labour is still making hunting its priority in the countryside. Rural people are desperately concerned about affordable housing, access to services, agricultural transition, and thousands other more important issues. Yet Labour wants to return to fight the culture war of 20 years ago. That was quite a good line. It wants to fight the culture war of 20 years ago. It's like, you had this battle. You basically won, even though there is this loophole. Why do you want to re-wage this battle? Well, the answer is because they can't really afford to do anything else. And, the politics of envy and class war, how Labour think they're going to shore up their base.
Yeah, and it's a little sign of what's to come with Labour. No real change, just more restrictions on your life, annoying things, woke overground lines, fox hunting bans. That's the kind of low-level social misery, as well as worse things. It's just going to be horrific on all fronts.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the Keir Starmer's kind of pitch is the Tories just want to engage in culture wars, whereas I care about real issues like the cost of living, the state of the economy, schools, the NHS. But actually, in office, the only thing they're going to do is engage in these kind of virtue signaling culture war gesture politics. And because they're not going to be able to do anything about those other more serious issues because, the Tories have tried pretty much everything, and there's only so much more money you can extract out of the British public to spend on public services. We're being taxed more highly than at any point before. There's really there's not much wiggle room. So actually, all Labour are going to do is wage culture war. They're not actually going to do anything about the things that Starmer claims he's going to do anything about. They're going to be what Starmer pretends the Tories are now.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, couldn't put it better myself. So that is pretty much the show, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We're going to probably go into we're definitely going to go into the paid section now for the subscribers to basedmedia.org. So go over there and subscribe if you haven't yet, for as little as £5 a month. And we're going to have loads more shows coming up and loads more content. But you get in there now. Many people have. In fact, I've been impressed by the amount of subscribers we've already got. But let's face it, not that much promotion and, a fairly soft launch. But thank you to everyone that subscribed. We're going to move over there in a sec. If you want to support me on my Substack, it's nickdixon.substack.com. If you want to buy me a coffee, it's buymeacoffee.com/nickdixon, or go to basemedia.org. I know people only have limited funds to go around. Maybe we'll incorporate everything at one point. We're doing our best. And Toby, is there anything you would like to plug?
Yeah, just to say this isn't the end of the podcast. This is just the end of the free bit. We're now going to move to the premium bit. And if you want to hear the rest of it, in which we're going to talk about what's happening across the pond, we're going to talk about the X-Files. We've got some stuff from the based department, the opposite of peak woke, things that'll actually cheer you up to hear about, a few sound things happening here and there, which we've managed to find. But if you want to hear about them, you have to subscribe. And as Nick says, you can do that for as little as £5 a month. Then you won't just be able to watch or listen to the premium bit of this podcast, but of other podcasts, which will shortly appear on our platform. So basemedia.org, click on sign up, subscribe for as little as £5 a month. Then if you want to support the Free Speech Union, go to freespeechunion.org/join, and the Daily Sceptic, just go to dailyskeptic.org, click on donate. And for as little as £5 a month, you can become a commentator and support all our work on the Daily Sceptic.
All right, excellent. I thought that was pretty well done. And yeah, basemedia.org. We'll see you over there. And to everyone else, stay skeptical.
Stay skeptical.